Good morning, everybody, and thank you for spending a few minutes with me on this Friday morning. I wasn't going to do a video this morning because I had no material, but when I was taking my dog out, as I do typically, sometime between midnight and 2 a.m., this time it was around 2 a.m., inspiration hit me. And I don't know why it hit me or why it came out this way, but I suddenly felt, well, here's what it was. The very first episode I did of my podcast while I was still in law school was with the almost valedictorian of the class. He was so credentialed. It was amazing. I don't have the mental brain power at the moment to list all of his credentials, but Marine. I don't know if he was a Marine, but he's like an Army officer. He worked on nuclear warships. He's probably a judge now. I guarantee you he is. He was so amazing. And he was my very first guest on my podcast. You won't find it if you go on YouTube or Rumble because it was audio only. For 3 years, I was doing audio only. So there's a whole archive of episodes that are not on video. But he gave me such an incredible lesson. I recommend you go check that out. He took me through history, political history, and why we have the system that we have in America and why it's good basically to be a conservative. And one of the things he did, one of about 30 things he did in that episode was explain to me something that I understood from law school, but it was great to get it from him and it was great to have it on record, which was this explanation of the Supreme Court case from, I think, the 1920s, or actually it might be 1905 or 1906, called Lochner, a very famous case. And what this case does, and the reason I'm going to explain it to you this morning very quickly, this is going to last 10 minutes, by the way, is because it highlights perfectly, I think, the interaction between libertarianism and statism, which is exactly where I am right now in trying to figure out my political identity. Remember, I've always voted for Democrats. I studied CRT in law school during the Trump era and the pandemic. My relationship with my father's a factor here. Mix it all together, and I'm searching for political identity. Do I want to keep voting for Democrats or not? And so I've been interviewing thought leaders for over 3 years now, and occasionally sprinkling in solo episodes like this. And now I'm kind of doing the solo episodes as live streams in the morning. So that's where we're at. So libertarianism, okay, and I've been interviewing a lot of libertarians lately, including presidential candidates. So I'm really deep into it in some respects. And the libertarian idea is that basically there should be no laws other than any law that conforms to the following principle. You should be able to do whatever you want as long as you don't harm anybody else, the non-aggression principle, okay? And basically all you need to add on to that to get a fairly complete picture of libertarianism is this idea that taxation is theft. It's all about property rights because the underlying idea is that we're all equal. And so if we're all equal, property rights should be the ruling concept because we are all equally capable of creating property, acquiring property, managing property, using property to enhance our lives. So the libertarians will say the state is nothing but a parasite. Government is nothing but a parasite. Anything more than the most basic enforcement of criminal property laws, crimes, is a parasitic entity that must be undone. Dr. Michael Rechtenwald, one of the libertarian candidates that I interviewed recently, just posted the other day, if you go to his account, a poem by William Blake. I'm not going to pretend to have been familiar with it, but it was something about a rose being sick and an invisible worm. And he goes, he asks, who is the invisible worm, or what is the invisible worm? What is the rose and what is the invisible worm? And I'm pretty sure the rose is a flourishing society and the worm is government sucking the life out of it. So that's the libertarian concept. The state is bad. It's a vampiric, parasitic entity. Okay. So what does this have to do with the Supreme Court case from the early 20th century about bakers? Yes, the case centered around a bakery in New York. Okay, a law about bakers in New York. Okay, the law said, the New York legislature passed a law that said bakers can only work X amount of hours a day. Say it was like 8 hours a day or whatever. You're like, okay, that's a labor law. It's protecting the labor. The Supreme Court, the majority of the Supreme Court said, they overruled it. They said, excuse me, pardon. The Supreme Court said that labor law violates the freedom of contract found in the 14th Amendment, and you're just violating people's freedoms. You know, if a baker wants to work 12 hours and 19 hours and make more money, then let them do it. I mean, we're talking about sugar and powder and bread and dough. I mean, and the justification of the law was that these things pose a serious health hazard to the bakers. And so the Supreme Court overturned it, and a libertarian would say, "Yes, that's awesome. Screw the state. They're trying to regulate people's ability to work how they want to. Nobody's forcing a baker to work 19 hours a day, 12 hours a day. It's just denying them the ability to do that." So the libertarian would cheer that decision on. And there was a very, very famous dissent from Oliver Wendell Holmes, an extraordinarily famous and pithy justice, who said basically, no, the state, when it's operating within its police powers, which means the police powers is the ability to regulate a state's ability to regulate a an issue that relates to health, safety, or morals. Okay, so that's what the police power is: health, safety, morals. Is that, yeah, no, when a regulation falls within that scope, which this one does, it is okay to interfere with citizens' freedom of contract. Okay, and eventually that case began through the lens of history was looked at as a tremendous black eye on the Supreme Court. Look at them; they're in the name of upholding the liberty of contract, they screwed over laborers, and so the Supreme Court in decades since has shifted away from that pro liberty of contract mindset towards pro state regulation, pro permissible state regulation. So doesn't that perfectly highlight this interaction between libertarian ideology and statism, right? That's it right there. Because the opponents, the critics of the labor law in New York State would say, no, that labor law didn't protect bakers. You know what it did? It created monopolies. It put small business owners out of business. And this is the libertarian argument. In the name of safety, what it really did was concentrate power among the elites. They say, I guarantee you, you know who lobbied for that law? The big bakers. It put the small guys out of business. So this is the incredibly interesting dynamic and argument from libertarians. Isn't that fascinating? So Lochner v. New York, check that out. It's just an amazing footnote in the Supreme Court's history. Really, it's more than a footnote. And so what else can I tell you? So I'm trying to figure out, like, where do I stand? Am I going to be a libertarian? Do I buy that logic all the way? Or am I going to be an independent where I say, no, I believe in government. It's just we got to clean up the government and get these moneyed interests out of government. That's the RFK Jr. take. And I guess I'll just say a quick thought on RFK's running mate. I like it. I like her pick as a pick because, first of all, she's attractive. She's young. That doesn't hurt, right? But her background in AI and her background in law, I find really appealing. And the fact that she's coming out and saying, oh, she's basically saying, aren't we all searching for our political identity? So that works for me. The one thing I don't like, from what little I know about her, is her support of these progressive DAs in California and maybe throughout the country who push soft on crime policies. No, I don't support that. We need to be strictly enforcing this is libertarian coming out. We need to be strictly enforcing property crimes. We can't be allowing people to steal stuff with no repercussions. Even if we want to say, hey, the criminal justice system needs to be reformed. Okay. I guess I could just give my little audience of 6 here a preview of the fact that Larry Sharpe, the great Larry Sharpe, has invited me to be on his panel show on Monday night. I interviewed him a couple weeks ago. He was kind enough to join me. We had a great conversation about the dynamic in the Libertarian Party, the crop of libertarian candidates, and actually the theme of that conversation was what's wrong with the Libertarian Party. So it was really interesting. And I guess he enjoyed it enough. He said, Escal, come on my show. So it's really cool, exciting, pretty cool time for me. I guess the last thing I'll mention is that today at 2 p.m., so I got to get permission from my job, which I'm going to in a few minutes, to sneak out a little early. I'm interviewing Nuclear Hazelnut. If you type that in on X, she'll pop up and you'll see she's a risk analysis analyst and influencer, promoting nuclear energy. And the funny thing is, we actually spoke for 40 minutes last week. And this is the first time this has happened to me in 3 years of podcasting. It's so embarrassing. I didn't fucking hit record. It was just mortifying. So somehow, by the grace of the Lord, she has agreed to join me again. So I'm going to do my best to act and pretend like I'm learning all this stuff for the first time when I talk to her. And hopefully it'll be an even better conversation because we've had a little practice. And we're going to learn about why nuclear energy is good. Okay, so that'll be this afternoon. Gosh, I mean, one funny thing I can tell you is that my girlfriend and I played Clue last night for the first time. Okay, so real quick, first of all, I've been dating my girlfriend for 4 months, been the happiest 4 months of my life. For about 5 months, I've had my dog Rosie, who I found on the street. Crazy. So in recent months, women have come into my life and it's been a blessing. So I'm playing Clue with my girlfriend last night, and it's taken a little longer than we're like, shouldn't we have finished by now? And she finally, so you do an accusation or an allegation. I think they call it an accusation. At the end of the game, you say, all right, are you right or wrong? And so she guessed, Professor Plum in the hall with the candlestick. And so we opened the cards, and it turns out it was Miss Scarlet and Miss Peacock in the hall. We had shuffled the cards wrong. And so we would have been basically playing all night trying to figure out what the hell was going on. And we found out that it was basically two women having a lesbian experience in the hall, which was exciting. And the game was still fun. But next time we'll pay more attention to how we're shuffling and perhaps actually play the game correctly. So yeah, not much else to say here. So I'll pretty much land the ship. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to keep experimenting with these lives. I enjoy it. I didn't have a particularly strong set of notes today. So I think yesterday's live stream was probably stronger, a little better. So moving forward, I'll make sure not to do this unless I have really clear notes and a nice agenda. But nonetheless, we did it. I hope it gave you a little bit of a sense of me. That's really what I want. I want you to know who I am, what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and then you can decide if there's any value for you to click the link in my bio, for you to become a regular listener of my podcast. That's really it. So thank you so much. Have a great day. Happy Friday. And that's all, folks. Enjoy your day.